fans, to another episode of Donnie's Disposals. I am your host, Coach Donnie Hess here, back with another AFL review. Ladies and gentlemen, 23 rounds down, one more to go. And joining me today from lovely California, as you'll see here in just a little bit, the background, magnificent, Mr. Gil Griffin. Gil, thanks for hopping on the podcast again.
No worries, mate. Good to be here, and hello to everybody across the country and across the world watching us.
Awesome, awesome. So let's jump right into it. Round 23 had a lot to discuss. We've got a lot to get through. Let's jump into it really quick. Just your initial thoughts of the round 23, because as we said, there is tons to talk about.
Well, you never like the umpires to take center stage, and at least in two matches I saw, they did. One which likely cost Adelaide or has cost Adelaide a final spot, and then the other one, how could they possibly have taken away what probably was the goal of the year by Bailey Banfield in the Fremantle Port match, where Bailey Banfield did that ridiculous bicycle kick and the ball had to roll just perfectly across the line. He got it across the line, and I cannot believe that it was overturned after a replay that showed it did not touch a Port defender.
It's the way it goes, unfortunately. And as a Swans fan, and I have numerous Crows fans, I don't want to discuss that particular topic just yet. We'll
I'm
get to
sure you
that a
don't.
little bit later. It has nothing to do with that. Like again, as I've said to many, I agree with many of the Crows fans because you will not hear me say it was a goal, it was a goal, it was a goal. I will say it. You will not hear me argue. I just the carry on a little bit is getting a little bit much, but we'll discuss that a little bit later. Let's jump right into round one, sees 1 versus 2 at Marvel Stadium as Collingwood fall to the Brisbane Lions 124-100. And is there concerns for the Pies going into finals considering the injuries are starting to mount up and their form has been less than impressive?
Absolutely would have to be a concern because, I have a friend of mine or mate down there who gave me some education on one of the greatest horses in racing in Australian history, Farlap. And I
Mhm.
don't, I don't know if you're familiar with Farlap or how many of our viewers are familiar with Farlap. I wasn't. But what I heard was Farlap got off to, in all of his races, just a phenomenal fast start, but then always would fade at the finish. And I think if you're Collingwood, you have to be concerned about that. And you're right, with injuries mounting up. And let's face it, an additional round. I mean, people aren't really talking that much about the fact that this year, 23 actual matches as opposed to 22. And all that really happened was you had one preseason match get taken away. But that's extra grueling, and it also poses an extra risk for injury. And they always say that the fittest team is one that usually finishes on top or comes to get the flag. But with Collingwood too, you have to wonder in their case, have they already peaked, and have they peaked
Mhm.
at the wrong time? That's always got to be a concern.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've said numerous times that I don't want to play my best footy in the first 15 weeks of the season. I want to play my best footy round 19, round 20, going into the finals because you're picking up steam just before finals and you're hitting it right at the peak time. You're timing your run perfectly. So we'll have to see. Again, Collingwood is still a strong team. There's still going to be a lot of people's tips, but I'm a little off them a little bit. Again, I've been a little off of them most of the time because I don't believe their style will go well in finals. It didn't last year, and I still don't believe it will going further. I think Fly needs to make a few adjustments to it to adjust to the tightness that is finals footy. But again, plenty of time to see that. We still have one more round to go. They will get some horses back, so we'll have to see how it goes come finals time. But definitely one to talk about. Not much to talk about when it comes to finals implications, but some big farewells as we see Jack Rewell and Trent Cotchin in their farewell match take down the North Melbourne Roos 101-72 for the Tigs. A good farewell for these two very highly thought of and the Richmond Footy Club.
Yeah, definitely. And then you also have to wonder, will there be a third farewell, not from footy, but maybe from Richmond in Dustin Martin,
Mhm.
if things go according to what the rumors are that Damien Hardwick goes to Gold Coast and might take his mentee, Dustin Martin, with him. It's interesting. Jack Revolt, I had the pleasure of meeting him in the Fox Footy Studios years ago when my book was out. And, a real nice gentleman. And, he talk about a storied career. he's achieved pretty much everything you could want. And the thing that I'm concerned about or thinking about with Dustin Martin is, will this accelerate his retirement plans? Because if you're Dustin Martin, what more can you really accomplish? I mean, you're a
Hmm.
premiership player, you're a Brownlow winner, you're a Norm Smith winner. What else does he have to do?
Hmm.
Um, or what else is there for him to accomplish? And I don't necessarily see a Dustin Martin deciding, hey, well, I've accomplished everything I could do here. Let me go to Gold Coast and see if I can get this side, which has never made the finals, into the finals. But it'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah, definitely. For me, I don't think Gold Coast can afford Dusty, so I don't see Dusty going up there. And from what I heard in the presser, the little tidbits that I heard, I don't think Dimmer is even looking at it. I think this is one of those Vic media specialists, like Dusty is the enigma, a little bit like Buddy, where he wants to get out of Vic, so he's out of the fishbowl. And I think it's a little more media driven than most people. And I don't think Gold Coast has the finances to be able, unless they ship half their list away, which would then kind of definitely hinder Dimma just the tiniest bit. So speaking of
Well,
gold,
but if but
go
if but
ahead.
if they did ship their half their list away, it wouldn't be surprising because we've seen them do it. You and I have talked about if
Hmm.
there were an all uh, Gold Coast alumni team. I mean, the names on that list, from
Hmm.
Dion Prestia to Tom Lynch to Charlie Dixon to many other players. I mean, you could probably field an all Australian side. So you really wonder with them, because I think just been a real concrete lack of a plan, and that's
Hmm.
evident. I mean, they've been in the league since what, 2011, and they still have never made finals.
Hmm.
That's a major embarrassment. And you're right. I don't think that I agree with you. I don't think that Gold Coast can afford that, and I'm not sure that Dustin Martin wants to attach his name and his legacy to that sort of club.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you there. I think they put out an all decade team, and somebody actually ripped it because they said it was 11 of the 18 names that were on the starting roster were not with the club anymore. It was
Mm.
crazy to look at. Speaking of that, there's a great transition as Gold Coast hosted the Carlton Blues, and again the Blues continuing hot form, but a little bit of a scare by the Gold Coast Suns, only getting a 4-point win. But Charlie Curnow, take a bow, young man, because it's hard not to say he is the reason Carlton won this game, which was a huge trap game for these Blues going into round 24.
Yeah, and then to think that the Blues have been in such torrid form even without without Harry Mackay. I mean, that's really big. I mean, once they get him fit and firing and all of that, they're going to be really dangerous. And we talked about the importance of peaking at the right time. Could we be seeing Carlton be peaking at the right time? Because right now, if I'm a supporter of another club that's in the eight, I don't want any part of Carlton right now.
Mm-hmm. I'm 100% with you. They're playing super, super well. I'm a little concerned that Mackay has kind of thrown a spanner in the works. I'm very interested to see how they go this week and then into the first week of finals, because they were just absolutely humming before Mackay came back in, and saw a little bit of a fumble a little bit with this round with Mackay coming back in. So we'll have to see how this Carlton team adjusts to Big Harry Mackay being back in the roster as we go further. And probably the result that I think absolutely shocked everybody in the AFL, besides the talking points that we'll get to a little bit later, is GWS absolutely handing the Essendon Bombers their tail on a silver platter by 126 points, 162-36. And I saw the statistic: Jesse Hogan beat the Essendon Bombers by himself. I believe it was 55-36. This an insipid performance by the Bombers, basically now pretty much making the finals impossible to be, though they're only one game out.
Well, you would have to mention Jesse Hogan, wouldn't you? With me.
Sorry, not trying to.
Well, I have been a huge critic of Jesse Hogan's when he was at Fremantle.
Mhm.
The fact that Fremantle mortgaged part of the future, and also traded Lockie Neal to get Jesse Hogan, and he was an absolute dud with the Dockers. But I've always said, if he can go to some other club and succeed, well, God bless him. So as they would say in hip hop, I ain't mad at him.
Mhm.
Um, but he had a performance for the ages, something to remember for his entire career. But it's very mercurial. It's really funny because I remember someone talking about Jesse Hogan as being a 60 goal a year player. Well, his career high is 46, so he's not a 60 goal a year player. But he did have a performance for the ages, and it's ironic that it's that kind of performance which has gotten GWS across the line and possibly cemented into the top eight. And it's one of these things where you're looking at this match and you're thinking, are GWS that good, or are Essendon that bad? Or you just don't know where the middle is on this, because you're right. No one was expecting a hiding like this. I mean, this is just insane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100% agree. And I would say it's 50-50. I don't think Essendon was that bad. I just Essendon just did not, and they kind of gave up after GWS kind of put a big lead on them, and they just kind of they waved the white flag a little too early, and Jesse Hogan had himself a field day. I really am shocked that he did not get 10, because I think his teammates were trying super, super hard at the end. So we go to the other. If it weren't for all of the drama and controversy in the next game after this one, this would be one I think a lot of people would talk about, is the Cats, the defending premiers, are out as they fall to the Saints 88-55, a 33-point win by Ross Lyon led Saints. And the Saints qualify and are locked into the finals, and the Cats get to play golf a little bit early this year.
Yeah, they do. And if not for the next result we're going to talk about, we could have seen the premier and the runner up both not make it into the eight. But it's really interesting because for me, having followed Fremantle, Ross Lyon is doing what he's always done when he's coached. He's taken a group of players that maybe don't have a star-studded roster, but he's gotten everybody to play their roles and pitch in. And here they are. Another Ross Lyon team has made the finals. And, it sort of fits the profile. A team where you don't have many clear-cut superstars, but with a lot of veteran experience. And so credit to him that he's been able to rally his troops and do something right to get St. Kilda into the finals. So, good on them. And it was, pretty convincing win.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And I think the Cats finally their age profile finally caught up to them. And from everything that I gather over the last couple of days, it sounds like at least 2 or 3 of their stars are basically being shut down for round 24, being sent to the surgeons to get off-season surgery. So I think the Cats are prepping for next year, but you kind of understand they had an incredible run last year. They didn't get much of an off season, so you kind of understand it. But again, the Saints, a pesky Saints team, have qualified. It'll be fun to watch that going forward. To the game that I know there's several watching this that cannot wait to hear what I have to say, because I've been kind of been trying to be radio silent on this as much as, because I wanted to make sure that I chose my words very, very correctly. Swans get a 1-point win, but everybody talks about it. The goal that was not a goal, that was a goal, but I want to kind of stay away from that a little bit, because in our burning questions we'll really, really kind of dissect that. But for me, this is one of those, the Swans survive, but Adelaide played one great quarter and almost stole it from the Swans.
Well, the biggest thing to me is that is the irony of this, because the AFL has a campaign, as many sports leagues do, with men telling other men in PSAs, don't be afraid to get help. Mm-hmm. So you got to think of the goal umpire. What is he doing not getting help? There's a whole apparatus set up for moments like that, which is score review. And I was just looking at this, and I was amazed that no other umpire went over to him to give that square signal, score review, umpire's call is this, we'll check it on the replay. And the thing that's so shocking, of course, and I know I'm not saying anything that hasn't been discussed, but in that kind of magnitude, the shot within a minute and a half left to play, you have to review that. I don't understand how it's not automatically reviewed. As a matter of fact, I thought in situations like that, it was automatically reviewed in that amount of time. And then hearing what I heard from the goal umpire about how he thought he heard the ball hit the post. Well, but he's there for his eyes, not for his ears. And if you think about that moment, think about the crowd noise. Think about players yelling in the goal square. Think about the fans. How can you discernibly isolate a sound of a ball thwacking the post against all of that other stuff? And I just don't understand how there was no help. And I'm wondering too, with replay control, why were they not in his earpiece saying, "Hang on, we need to check this out. We need to fully investigate this." And then the other thing is too, Ben Keys might not be the greatest actor of all time, but if I'm the goal umpire, I really do have to wonder, well, if this is really behind, why is he running into the crowd to accept their congratulations?
Hmm.
Why did the Sydney players look downcast? Why is everyone in the Crows celebrating? And I think for that, when in doubt, you absolutely have to ask for help. And I don't know, I'm not inside this umpire's head,
Hmm.
but I don't know if it's pride. I don't know if it's thinking about embarrassment, but in any situation like that, when in doubt, you have to ask for help.
Yep. Hey, everything that you said, I 100% agree. Now, from everything that I'm hearing, it again, this is not me making it okay because it's not. But and I'll come up with a little bit later. I'll come up with a couple of situations where I think that some of the Crows' reactions have been a little bit of a carry on. But please hear me out. This is not me attacking the Crows fans because, as I told many online, I 100% agree that was a goal, should have been called that way. 100. The reason that I believe it was not reviewed was because the goal umpire believed that when Callum Mills' hand slaps the pad is when the ball deflected. So that's the explanation that I believe is the explanation for that. Two, it is not a goal. No behinds are automatically reviewed because of that. That is not part of the only goals are reviewed because the soft call is a behind, it is not automatically reviewed. So that kind of explains that a little bit. Do I understand and completely agree with everything that you said? But here's the other thing. Did it earlier in the season, Ollie Florent celebrate like he kicked a goal and the ball fell 2 meters short. So players
Mm-hmm.
can celebrate, but that really doesn't mean
Mm-hmm.
anything too. I've even seen guys not celebrate and it's eventually called a goal before,
Right.
aka in a showdown between the Crows and Port, almost kind of the same situation. So again, do I 100% understand the gripe that the Crows fans had? Absolutely. Some of the proposed reactions I think are a little far fetched. And like I said, we'll discuss this just a little bit later. I don't want to spend the entire time. Swans get the win again. Dubious 100%. Totally understand that. Like I said, we'll discuss a little bit more of some of my thoughts on that just a little bit. Let's jump to the other upset that blew people's minds this weekend as West Coast. I know the evilness that is the other side of the West as a Frio supporter. But the Eagles get their second win, knocking off the Doggies, and now the Doggies pedestal has been knocked a little bit, and Bevo is on shaky ground now.
Definitely. And you have to wonder if some complacency seeped into that Western Bulldogs change room before the match. I mean, thinking that they had it in the bag. And
Mhm.
it's very interesting with Adam Simpson being under such fire out west. You wonder if was the Eagles, a case of the Eagles players really trying to rally behind their senior coach
Mhm.
and trying to save his job. That wouldn't be the first time it's happened to a popular senior coach or baseball manager or anything like that, where people really want to get behind and support their guy or their woman or depends on the league, and they want to save that coach. So yeah, the result was surprising. This is probably the best you're going to see out of West Coast, and the Bulldogs totally lackluster performance. Um, there's their old adage again: if you kick more behinds than goals, you're likely to get your behinds kicked,
Mhm.
and that absolutely bit the Western Bulldogs. And then just very late in that match, there was just such sloppiness where it's not like the Western Bulldogs did not have opportunities to win that match.
Mhm.
But if you count the number of fumbles, drop marks, any number of things that they really squandered opportunities and should have won this match.
Yeah, and it wasn't because of weather, because it was under the roof in Marvel Stadium.
Right.
It baffled me a little bit that this Doggies team absolutely fell apart. Now, no Libba could throw a little bit, but I don't think that they should not have lost even without Libba. But Jeremy McGovern came back, and this year when he has played, they've played a lot better. Andrew Gaff, I think, has finally started to kind of pull his head out of a body cavity. I really shouldn't say on this
Oh, that's right.
podcast.
Evilness again. Evilness alert. And with me, Andrew Gaff. Come on
I
now.
know. I'm trying not. I'm not trying not to
We have
bring up
not
the evil
forgotten
ones there.
2018 and Andrew Brayshaw. But if I can
I
jump
know.
in too, how about Jamie Cripps?
Yeah.
Boy, did he not have the game of his life?
Mm-hmm.
And McGovern was showing his familiar form, intercepting and everything that came near him. But yeah, Jamie Cripps he was everywhere and did
Mm-hmm.
everything. And so he definitely put on that superhero cape to take West Coast over the line.
Yeah, definitely. Again, it's you kind of feel good, and then there's some people that are like, "Why did they win? They lost out on Harley Reid." And I kind of gotta give Adam Simpson a little bit because he threw a couple of jabs in his post game interview, and I appreciated that as a coach. So that it kind of tells the media, "Hey, shut up." And it's like, hey, we understand what you think, but that's not always what happens inside the four walls of many of the clubs. So we jumped to what I thought was an absolute cracking game of footy at the MCG as Melbourne get the win over the Hawks. But again, the Hawks proved to be quite the pesky team coming late, only losing by 27 to a D's team that people are still talking about as a flag contender.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're a Hawthorne supporter, you've got to be excited about the future with that performance in that last quarter and what they were able to do. And they were taking on a really tough side in Melbourne. If I could just digress for 1 second, though,
Sure.
speaking of the MCG, to me, going back to that very first match we talked about, to me, it is just not ever. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, and especially Collingwood supporters, it just doesn't feel right seeing Collingwood play a home match on
Mm-hmm.
Marvel Stadium grounds. Come on. I mean, Collingwood are one of the teams that made the MCG what it is. And I imagine it had to be like if you're a Yankee fan and go back to the mid 70s, kind of like when the Yankees played at Shea Stadium, the Mets home for that year and a half, the Yankee Stadium was being renovated. But
Mm-hmm.
just something just does not look right to me. I've been watching footy like you have for
Mm-hmm.
almost a quarter of a century, and something just does not look right about Collingwood playing a home match in Marvel.
Yeah. Well,
No,
the quick
no, it's not
explanation
right.
of that is that each of the clubs have been told they will play a home game at Marvel Stadium. It's just the way it came out because the AFL owns Marvel. They don't own the MCG, so that's kind of the explanation here. Do I understand your argument? Absolutely, because you're going to get a lot more of the MCG than you are at Marvel, but it's one of those contractual things that there's just not much you can
Right.
do about it, unfortunately. I agree. I do agree with you. It would have been awesome to be in a bigger stadium, but in some situations, it keeps the comp even more entertaining because now first place is still up for grabs because Brisbane lost. So I didn't want to
Well,
bring
you don't like
that. I
watching the
didn't.
seagulls congregate on the boundary line and on the 50-meter arc. I mean, come on, that's
Yeah, always entertaining for sure. So no, the D's Hawks game again. This was a cracking game again. The D's show that they're still got a couple of really good players. Or Bailey Fritsch is still to come back on this team. So if you're the Melbourne Demons, the question is, do you rest a couple of guys, give them 2 weeks rest going into the finals, or do you go full bore in this game against Sydney? But again, the Hawks tested them. And really quickly, just in a sidebar, your thoughts on Simon Goodwood's comments on Finn McGuinness? Because for me, if I'm the Hawthorne Hawks, I chuckle at the fact that Simon Goodwin is so bent out of shape that he had to say something about Finn McGuinness. Because if I'm a coach, a guy like Finn McGuinness would be a pleasure to have on my roster.
well. I think Simon Goodwin's got enough trouble to worry about with the drug allegations and
Mm-hmm.
with the other things that have come out about his program. So yeah, maybe saying what he said was not the wisest thing. Maybe discretion is the better part of valor.
Mm-hmm.
Or whatever adages are just STFU and just mind to stay in your lane.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's got enough on his plate.
Yeah, definitely for sure. We'll pull the band-aid off really, really quickly. Last game of the rounds, he's Port Adelaide, go out to Optus Stadium and get the win as the loyal Dockers fan on the podcast. Your thoughts on this one? Because again, I think this is a Dockers team that I'm not going to say they disappointed because I was a little bit worried that some of the holes left with a couple of the exits with Griffin Lowe, Blake Acres. I mean, for me, again, Lob I think is an addition via subtraction, but that's me personally. This was a Dockers team that really they were inconsistent and they had flashes of brilliance, but just not consistent enough to be a finals contender this year.
Well, yeah, and I think it can kind of go into the category of honorable loss, not as
Hmm.
honorable as the loss to Brisbane was, but it was just it was the difference was really evident in the class and the ball use and composure, all of that. But the Frio are a very young side. I think the bright side is the in the AFL's 22 under 22, Fremantle had the most representation of any club. So it's a club that's going to need to play together as a unit for a very long time before that premiership window opens up again. Could it open up again next year? Well, it's a possibility. It depends on how the preseason goes. It depends on a couple of veterans and whether their bodies hold up. Another good thing for Frio supporters, Matthew Johnson getting the Rising Star nomination. Although I have to admit, I was surprised because I thought that was going to go to another young player for Fremantle, Tom Emmett,
Hmm.
who made his debut, had 13 possessions, kicked a couple of goals, and did a lot of good things on the ground. And he really looks like a player. And Fremantle needs somebody that is going to be kind of a big-bodied, bruising type. Um, Personally, I think also Fremantle have really lost that mongrel that used to define the era in which Russ Lyon coached them. When you had players like Hayden Valentine and Nick Subin and Ryan Crowley, I think that's been really missing. And it's just interesting. One other quick thing that doesn't necessarily relate to Fremantle now, but you talked about resting players in the last round. People forget that when Fremantle made the 2013 Grand Final,
Hmm.
they had their last match of the season in at Marvel against St. Kilda, and then Ross Lyon very controversially rested most of his starting players. Saying that they were going to be managed. And then the next week, Fremantle went on to upset Geelong down at Cardinia Park. And since he did that, the AFL then had that rule, then instituted the bye week for everybody
Hmm.
between the last round of the season and the first week of finals. But I digress on that one. But I think Fremantle are setting up to be in good shape. Is it going to hurt a little bit when Fremantle doesn't have that top 5 pick draft time when that's going to go to Melbourne for Luke Jackson? I mean, there have been
Hmm.
times that Luke Jackson has looked worth every penny of that trade. The biggest question, though, I think going forward is what happens to Liam Henry. Is Liam Henry going to stay? I mean, he seems to really have found himself on the wing, although I will say, while he's been great at gathering the ball and distributing, my thing is if you've watched him kick, his hospital balls are going to end up getting some teammates killed if he doesn't
Hmm.
refine that skill. But I think he's only 21 years old and very valuable. And he's been in the Fremantle system really since he's been 13 years old in the Next Generation Academy. So I don't think this is someone that Fremantle wants to lose. Will he be lured by Victorian teams calling for him or another team we don't know about? Possibly. So
Hmm.
I think they'd be better served having him. Um, but I do think that this is a team that's going to get better as long as they continue to play together.
Yeah, 100% agree. And again, Port, find a way to win again, scrapping of it. It'd be very interesting to see how it goes. But we'll jump to burning questions. And plain and simply, I know there's been a few people that have been asking me this question and kind of how I've reacted to the whole Swans Crows thing. And I put how big was the error, but I want to change it just a little bit because like I said a few times, I think the carry on from Adelaide has been a little over the top. And again, I understand that you're upset, but I keep hearing people say it. It cost them a finals. Factually not accurate yet. Factually not accurate because if we go to the ladder really quickly, even if we were to flip the scores, okay, let's go back. Let's go back. Adelaide
Okay,
would be at
let's take a look at that
44.
ladder.
Adelaide would be at 44, and the Swans would be at 46. Here's the thing. If GWS and Sydney both win this weekend, again, some people would say that's not going to happen. Carlton and Melbourne should beat them. Well, but humor me. If both those teams win, unless there's a massive percentage jump, and again, West Coast is playing better, there's no guarantee Adelaide will beat West Coast. Even if you flip it and say, humor me, that Sydney and GWS win and Adelaide were to lose, that actually wouldn't cost them a final spot. So I don't like this. It cost them a final spot. It potentially could
Mm-hmm.
if results go that way. So I'm not trying to downplay the Crows because I understand their arguments. I understand their gripe, really do. But there's this narrative out there that it cost them the finals. You got to beat West Coast first, which West Coast is playing at home much better. I think Jeremy McGovern, if he plays, could make this an interesting game. If he doesn't play, I think the Crows win it. But there's no guarantee that the Giants will fall to Carlton. There's no guarantee that Sydney will lose to Melbourne. Sydney's at home. So I kind of wanted to spell that it didn't cost them a finals. It cost them the potential for finals. So not trying to get technical there, but and then the other thing that I want to say that is that everybody's like, this is a huge travesty. Da, 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 da. Um, you and I are Americans. Call the New Orleans Saints. Ask them about the pass interference call that cost them a Super Bowl. Ask the Irish men's soccer team how it felt to have a human error cost them a chance in the World Cup against France. All due respect, Adelaide, this is not a finals game. it potentially could cost you finals money, but compared to some human error that happens all the time in sport, I don't think I'm jumping too far to say there are many, many sporting events that human error is going to happen until robots are umpiring sport. Human error is going to happen. I really annoys me that Gil McLaughlin has sent this umpire and really ran over him with a bus, backed up and did it again and again and again. I don't believe this umpire should have been stood down. He made a mistake. It happens. There's umpires in every single game. There is not a single fan of all of footy that will say that an umpire got a game 100% right. Why? Because this is a very difficult game to umpire. So the fact that this goal umpire is being stood down is pathetic for me. You have scapegoated this guy when you could have put in the system to make it automatic that any scoring shots are automatically reviewed because you put it as goals. That takes it to where his mistake is now what it is. So this is more on the AFL than anything. It's not on this goal judge because the AFL had the opportunity to make sure that a safety net for something like this could happen, and it was not there.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you on one thing there.
Shoot.
I do go along with the standing down, but not for maybe the reason that you're talking about. I think the standing down really ought to be because he did not ask for help. I mean, he goes through training. You go to umpire school. Everything has to be. If you have any doubt at all, you get help. What would it have hurt if he had just owned up to that? I'm really not sure about this, or if he had just really taken the long view and said, this is potentially really huge. I really
Mm-hmm.
do need to get help. I need a second opinion. We see it in baseball all the time with home plate umpires. And if a batter swung or checked his swing. And, it's interesting because we had a couple of years ago in that playoff series between the Dodgers and Giants,
Mm-hmm.
the series ended on a check swing call. And I'll even go ahead and answer something or add something else to baseball. Ask the 1985 St. Louis Cardinals how they
Mm-hmm.
felt about George or Jorge Orta being called safe at first base when he clearly was out, when replay
Mm-hmm.
wasn't even a thing yet. But to your point about the Crows and this being a potential finals or potential robbing of a final spot, it's interesting because if you look back in at least two of the five Crows matches, let's look at this. When
Mm-hmm.
they were playing against Melbourne, they lost by 4 points and they kicked 13-15.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they kick one more goal, they win that match. If you look at the match against Brisbane, they lost by one straight kick, and again, they kicked 13-15. If they don't miss a couple of those shots, they beat Brisbane and wouldn't be in the position of
Mm-hmm.
having had to have beaten Sydney that night to have gotten into the finals or really cemented the possibility of a final spot, because there's a reason for everything. And if you think about championship or premiership clubs, they make the most of their opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
and that they don't have excuses as to why they find a way. They find a way to win. And so I think that's an important thing, that what you were talking about also is that if this were a finals match, then I think there might have been some different responses where every scoring shot is reviewed, where it doesn't matter what the umpire's call is, that you go through that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not around as a fan when Siren Gate happened in Tasmania between Fremantle and St Kilda,
Mm-hmm.
but that where a result was reversed. But you're right. There is human error, but at that same point, I think there comes a time when, to guard against human error, I think that also points to a human being exercising really good judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like here, Donnie. When I teach, I don't pretend to know everything.
Mm-hmm.
And if there is something where could it possibly be embarrassing if a student uh, corrects me or gets me on something I thought I knew? Not anymore. I don't find that embarrassing because, as you said, we're human. We can make mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
and you could learn something from the experience. So I don't, again, I don't know this umpire's personality, and that umpire has to be feeling really badly. And it's crazy though to think that wasn't somewhere in the back of his mind to be concerned. How do I get out of this town safely if I make the
Mm-hmm.
call that the fans are going to be wanting to come guns blazing at me? So,
Mm-hmm.
but I think the more courageous thing of that umpire to have done was just admit, I'm not sure I have this right. That's why I need to get help. And I think if that had happened, and the protocol had gone through, he'd be totally off the hook, and we wouldn't even be talking about this.
Mm-hmm.
So
100%
I think
agree.
it's a good lesson for arbitrators of any sporting event that allows it. Is when in doubt, you have to get help. You have to.
Yep, I completely agree. And we have Ross's question a little bit later, and I think some of the idea, and I've heard this come out by a couple of different people, and I actually like this. So I'm interested to hear what you say as somebody that's seen this, and I really be interested in the comment section for some of the older AFL fans, what they think about it. But we'll get to that in just a little bit. Next question. I hate to say it, unfortunately, because of the way things kind of went out. I think this final round's a little anticlimactic because really there's only one spot left, and that's the Giant spot in
Right.
8. Is it a little anticlimactic to you because of the way things turned out? There's only one spot available, and if the Giants win, unless there's a massive win by the Duggies down in Geelong, the finals are pretty much set, which is kind of anticlimactic considering if things turn a little bit way, there could be 2 or 3 spots still available going to the final round.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. The irony is that as a fan from the U.S. and who enjoys sports from other parts of the world not imitating the U.S., what I'm afraid of is that because of its nature as being anticlimactic, is this going to spur more calls from some people within the AFL that are going to be calling for a wild card round, or
Mm-hmm.
going to be calling for a more Americanization of the sport, which I hope really does not happen. I enjoyed the game because it is Australian, because it's not American. I still love the fact that there are no surnames on the backs of jumpers. That
Mm-hmm.
you're forced to learn who the players are. That the fact that there are no timeouts within play. The fact that the players don't know the score, don't know the time
The
left
time. Yep.
as they're on the ground. I love those differences. To me, it makes it uniquely Australian. So I just think it's luck of the draw that this year you have an climactic final round.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you're going to get years like that. Some years you're going to get a lot of drama in the rounds and everything like that. So I guess to quote Billy Joel on the AFL, don't go changing to try and please me.
Mm-hmm.
I love the game just the way it is.
Yep.
So
I'm 100% with you. This is one of those years that really helps bolster the let's have a wild card because it's so close around that. But look at one of those years when we already knew who the 8 was 2 rounds left. That would not be a fun wild card because 7 and 8 are going to smash 9 and 10. So it's one of those where I understand this year why the wild card has gotten a lot of smoke and the fire's growing a little bit. But I think this is one of those years where it's because of the situation, it's almost recency bias that it's why it's picking so much team. I agree with you. I don't like it because honestly, and maybe it's just a little bit of personally, I like the buy round because it lets the women have a round to themselves without any worry. Most of the media are going to be talking about the finals and OMG, we don't have finals. Yeah, go out and support the women. And again, that spurs a whole another septic part of social media,
yeah,
unfortunately. But it really is annoying sometimes that I just kind of get this let the women have a little bit. I know it's for some people it's like, okay, congratulations, go back to your hole, get out of here. I really wish that they would give a little bit more positive pub on some of these places, but nope, they're going to talk about the men. So I'm not going to fight against a brick wall in that situation. So I agree with you. I don't want a wild card round as much as it may intrigue some people. I'm just like, that's just no. Let the women have their round, get the finals going, and then let's have fun because you wouldn't have had the doggies magic that you did in 2016 if it weren't for this bye round because they wouldn't have been fully healthy. Probably would have lost that first round in 2016. Would not have been the doggies year if it weren't for that bye round. So as much as people complain about it, it has really given an evening out of the competition a little bit. Now this year could it help Collingwood because it helps the Dacos and Amore get healthy before the finals start? We'll have to see. So we'll jump to producer
well,
Ross's
before you jump, before you
go.
jump, that's a great place for me to plug my AFLW coverage for footyology.com.au because next weekend I will be covering round one of AFLW and writing a preview for it. So if you get a chance, if you don't mind, you can check out my weekly columns on AFLW at footyology.com.au. And then
Fantastic.
also adding to your point though about that, I think for the men on the men's side I think it's also really good to have a week off and
Hmm.
to have all the finals clubs start on as equal footing as you can. It gives
Hmm.
people a chance to heal their bodies. It gives people, injured players, another week to return, right? So I think that's another really good thing. And let's face it, after following AFL for 24 straight weeks, almost nearly half the year, it's a good detox. It's a good detox to step back and then really sink in or to dig into that last part of the year.
Hmm.
Um, I know for me as a supporter of a club that isn't in the eight, it's a little difficult sometimes the level of intensity that can drop off for us if our clubs are not in the eight. You're not as maybe present and invested as you are every other year in your scoreboard watching and all that other fun stuff. But it's gonna be a really good final series,
Hmm.
and you're right. I think there's a lot of support that can be given to AFLW, and I'm in a tough position here because as a man covering AFLW, I want to be sensitive to that. Where I think AFLW might thrive the best might be concurrently as curtain raisers to the AFL season. I don't know that that's the answer,
Mm-mm.
but I do like moving the season. Okay, that would be an interesting debate you and I could have at some point, because I do love the fact that the spotlight's going to be on the women.
Hmm.
But what I'm afraid of, and this I totally understand this is a topic for another time, but I'm just concerned sometimes that perhaps there may be footy withdrawal that interferes with women's footy as far as AFLW and attendance and all those kinds of other things. And I also wonder if it might be easier for the women who have to work full-time jobs, if it might not be easier on their schedule until you get equalization with as many games played. Does it make employment possibilities harder if to be playing footy in the season that's not concurrent with the AFL season, or would it make it easier? There are a lot of things to consider, but at the end of the proceedings, I really would feel most comfortable if it's the women themselves, not some guy in America or some guy anywhere making that choice for them. I think the players are going to have to decide what to do, and they've already had some say in when the best part of the calendar year, or if it overlaps into another calendar year, their season is going to be. So if that decision comes from them, I'll go with whatever they say.
Yeah. Well, we can have that. We'll definitely have that discussion. In fact, I think we're definitely off mic have to talk because I'm getting everything together for my coverage for the podcast on AFLW, and it is filling up quickly. In fact, I'm looking at it right now. 7 of the 10 rounds are already filled, and I've got some great guests to hop on. I don't want to take up too much time because I know we're in a little bit of a time crunch. So we'll jump to producer Ross's question. And I love this. Ross has got a great idea that I've seen bowdied about. So we'll throw it to Ross. Ross, throw out your question.
O'Connor, that's a beautifully weighted kick.
So after this week, apparently there's a bit of a goal controversy. I have no idea why this came up. I mean, I didn't see anything that happened during the course of any action from this round that might spark outrage with how the AFL has handled goal reviews or officiating or anything like that. So I'm a little confused, but nonetheless, let's address this controversy because I think the Bevy of Bloods podcast has done a great job maybe looking at changing the rules a little bit on what is a goal, what's behind, what's out in the full. So their mock up to changing the rules a little bit is if it hits off the inner goal post but goes through, then that's a goal. If it hits off the goal post and just comes back into play, it's a play on. If it hits off the inner goal post and goes into the outer goalpost, that's behind. Same thing if it hits on the outer goalpost, goes through, that's also behind. If it hits off the outer goalpost, goes out of bounds, that's out in the full. Now, I think this is a great way where they could really address the controversy, make things a little bit easier, and not have to worry about those super tight inch margins on the goal reviews. It'll change everything. It'll make everything less of a hassle, less controversy, just easier all around. So we'll see if the AFL wants to make a change to this. Donnie, Gil, what do you guys think?
O'Connor, that's a beautifully weighted kick.
Thanks, Ross. A great question. I've seen this question bandied about, and I know when you messaged me this, you attached a really good friend of the podcast, the Bevy of Bloods post on this, and I love it. So Gil, I will repeat the question really, really quickly. Should the AFL make a rule change of how goal/behinds work if the ball hits the post? And if so, I agree with his proposal that if the ball hit the goalpost and goes through, it should be a goal because hey, let's just make it to where we take away the snicko a little bit to hey, if it goes through, it's a goal, no matter if it hits the post or not.
Okay, I got 2 words. Hail, actually 3 words. Hail to the no. No. If it hits the post, it's a behind. Simple. Or if it hits the behind post, it's out of bounds on the full. No, don't do that. This is not the NFL. I don't want to see the AFL become like the NFL, where if it hits off one of the behind posts and goes through the goal post, that it's a goal. No, absolutely not. Tradition. Stick to tradition. I love that. The ball has to go through. It has to go through. And once it goes over, even by a centimeter, end of story, it is a goal. And I say that even though, if you look back at the history of Western Derbies, one of the greatest Western Derbies that was ever played, Fremantle and West Coast, the Dockers ended up losing a Western Derby because Hayden Ballantyne launched a miracle set shot from the boundary, which looked until the very last second that it was going through. And then it hit the woodwork. And I couldn't believe some Dockers players, you can see it in the footage, are even looking around at the umpire saying, well, come on, mate, isn't that a goal? No, it's not a goal. It hit the behind post. That's why you have a behind. That's why you have a behind post. That's why the rule is there. If it hits the goal post, if it hits it, it is a behind. Now, what would be really cool is if there was some technological invention, and this is where my sci-fi fandom comes in here. What if there's some great invention in the future that if it hits the posts, that some buzzer will go off and some gleaming red light will emerge, showing everybody it hit the post. But for me, no. If it hits a post, that is a behind. That is, the footy gods here are on my side. The footy gods did not invent this great game. The Wurundjeri people did not invent this great game so that if a ball hits a post, that it's a goal. No. No, Ross, come on. What are you thinking? Come on.
Because the other thing, I'm weird. Like I think think about the chaos of if it hits the post dead center and goes back into play, the pack that would form underneath the ball. So I'm weird. Like I would be interested to see it trial just to see how it would go. I mean, if it was an absolute cluster, you know what, then I understand it. I'm one of those that I understand, but it would take a lot of controversy out of some things. So I'm not 100% against it because then the situation that you just had would be eliminated if you eliminated that rule. So it's one of those.
But so could the umpire asking for help.
This is true, but as I told you, goals are reviewed, behinds aren't. I understand you asking for help.
And that should be the thing that's changed. Scoring
and
shots
it sounds like they are. I think it sounds like they're really looking at it, or even putting in some kind of 8-second delay, which I'm not real big with that one because it's.
But it's better than what happened in Adelaide.
If you had the
8 seconds,
not going to hear any argument there.
That 8 seconds was better. And I've got a rule proposal for you. And actually, this was suggested to me by a mate of mine living in LA who used to play for Collingwood back in the day. And he was an emergency in the 1990 grand final. His name is Andrew Tarpey. You can look him up. Good mate of mine. He actually has this suggestion, which I actually really like. What if you pass the ball behind to a teammate, it's automatic play on? I like that because late in the piece, because we saw this in Port Adelaide and Fremantle. You had the old NCAA basketball keep away, which you can't blame a side for doing late in the match. But it certainly would add some excitement if they choose to play keep away and they kick behind. Why can't it be play on? Or and maybe as a trial, maybe they introduced that in the last 5 minutes of every quarter. Although I kind of like it generally. If you kick to a teammate behind you, it's automatic play on. I really like that.
It's definitely a good thought. I'd love to see it trialed to see how it would change it. It would definitely be interesting to see how a switch of play would change because of that. So it's a fascinating one there. So unfortunately,
it's better than that super goal concept they tried.
That was
please don't bring that back.
Raise up above, raise into the sky.
Yeah, please. No. Don't.
All right,
no more super goals.
I know we're in a crunch for time, but I still want to ask this question because you are a huge Frio, and I try to get a question about the team of that the person that I'm chatting with supports. So your thought, can you classify this year's Fremantle's Docker season a success, or is this a failure because fell short of finals?
It's got to be a failure. I mean, every club aims to make finals, and by that very narrow standard, yeah, it's a failure. I think that there have been some successes, but I think if you look at the fixture for the beginning part of this year, the first 6 matches, people were really thinking the experts, so-called experts, really had Fremantle winning 5 of the first 6 matches, and that's the difference in the season, right? So I think that one thing that really hurt was what you were alluding to before, some of the departures that happened. Mainly, I think Blake Acres on the wing, because
Mhm.
that was a big situation or a big position that Fremantle had to fill. Now, as far as Rory Lobb goes, he would have been very handy, but at the same time, if Rory Lobb had been healthy or actually no, if Rory Lobb had stayed, well, that might have limited Jai Amos's development. And Jai Amos has kicked 38 goals this year and is
Mhm.
showing flashes of becoming a superstar. So I'm not sure that his loss was as big, but I definitely think that it was definitely a step behind. It was definitely, and I think the players themselves would say that it was a failure. That being said, I think that the group overall is better for having another full year of experience. And I don't say it lightly when there's something really good to look at in having the most representation in 22 under 22.
Mhm.
And I think the biggest question, though, for Fremantle is going to be what to do when you have Sean Darcy and Luke Jackson in the same lineup. And I've heard people say this. Paul Hazelby has written the former Docker player, has really written some good columns about this, about the importance of having both of them in the team. What happens? What does that look like? Should Darcy be traded for picks, which Fremantle are sorely needing? I would not trade him. But what I would do, and what I really like, is to have Luke Jackson involved in everything. And if he is not in the center square as a ruckman for me, I want him there as a midfielder, because I think that he can be a new kind of Dean Cox. And my friend Corey McKernan is going to love me
Mhm.
referencing him, or a Corey McKernan in the middle. And so, yeah, Unicorn is a great nickname for him. And if you have him as an on-baller, I think that only helps, although he definitely has forward craft and goal kicking skills. But if you keep Luke Jackson involved in the game, he's a real difference maker. And I think it clearly hurt when we had him just stowed away in the forward line. That when he is a ruck, he's involved in everything. And I think he and Sean Darcy can be a really strong tandem. Hopefully, it wouldn't go the way of what happened in Melbourne with Maxi Gawn and Brody Grundy.
Mhm.
But I think it's possible to work. I think it absolutely is. It's up to Justin Longmuir to devise, and his staff to devise a way to maximize the two of them being together. You can understand the argument that if they traded Sean Darcy, yeah, that's going to get some really good draft choices for next year. Personally, I wouldn't do that. I definitely want to give it another year and to see how those two work together.
Yeah, I would not disagree with you. I think there's still some ways to work it out. And again, with Jackson's ability to kind of shift around the ground, I think it's definitely worth at least another year of thinking about it. Could that decrease Darcy's trade value a little bit? But you'll have to see. So we'll jump to it. I'm going to take over the podcast just a little bit here for the next few seconds. Is I do my team of the week, and I've kind of refined it a little bit to make it a little more to give a little bit more love to more people, because the way I kind of originally did the analytics, it was getting a lot of the halfbacks. So what I did was this year I added wing players. So I will give 2 wings a spot. I will make sure that each of the lines, fullback and halfback, gets some love here. So we're going to get a little bit more diversified team of the week. So we'll start on the defense and the fullback line. Sees Essendon's Nick Hind, Geelong's Zach Guthrie, and Adelaide's Brody Smith. A little bit of a smaller one, but some really good ball movers on this group. And the halfback line sees Brisbane's Kitty Coleman, GWS's Harry Himmelberg, and Adelaide's Wayne Millera. In the mids, out on the wing, sees Collingwood's Josh Dacos and the Western Bulldogs' Adam Treloar. In the center square, sees Taryn Thomas of the North Melbourne Roos, GWS's Tom Green, and the Western Bulldogs' Marcus Bontempelli. The ruck is St. Kilda's Rowan Marshall. And the forward line, half forward line, sees Richmond's Shai Bolton, Carlton's Charlie Curnow, and West Coast Jamie Cripps, as you said, with an incredible game. Full forward line, Nick Larkey of the North Melbourne Rouge, Gold Coast David Swallow, and GWS's monster game from Jesse Hogan. On the bench, defender, ruckman, midfielder, and forward, one from each position. West Coast Jeremy McGovern, I think he had an incredible game. I got to give him a little bit of love on this. The Western Bulldogs ruck, Tim English, is going to be the backup. Midfielder, Port Adelaide, Zach Butters with another incredible game. And forward from the Brisbane Lions, Charlie Cameron, round out the team really quickly. I know there was a lot of names really quickly. Your thoughts on round 23's team of the week?
Well, here's what I'm going to do. I am going to exercise what that umpire should have done and ask for help. So I'm going to defer to you, Donnie, on all of that. I don't disagree. The only thing that I might have, only player I might have added might be Jason Horn-Francis, who had that great game against Fremantle. I really thought he was incredibly strong in that match. So I'm not going to disagree with what you pick. I know that talk radio or podcast radio is supposed to be combative sometimes between host and co-host or guest or whatever. I'm not going to combat you. I'm asking for help. I am deferring to your expertise on that one.
Well, the biggest thing is for me is I put a lot of emphasis on the goal scoring, because I think it's one of those that kind of helps.
How American of you.
Yeah, I know a little bit, but it changed the analytics a little bit, and it gives credit sometimes, because you see these guys like they get 40 disposals, but they get no goals and they only have 4 or 5 scoring involvements. So I've kind of neutralized it a little bit. Sometimes it actually does get a little bit more of a plethora of people in it. So, but it's a lot of fun. It takes a little bit of work over the weekends, but it's definitely worth it. So my homage to the fourth and long part of the podcast is the power rankings, and it's a what have you done for me lately? Again, I take the last 5 games. How you doing? Are you winning goals? Are you winning games consecutively? So here it goes. Number 5, the Melbourne Demons. Number 4, the St. Kilda Saints. Number 3, the Brisbane Lions. Number 2, the Sydney Swans, aka quotations for some people in South Australia. And number 1, the Carlton Blues round out the top 5. Again, win streaks by Carlton and Sydney put them at the top. Brisbane looking strong. St. Kilda being a team that's doubted but winning games, and Melbourne another strong win against a pesky Hawks team. So we'll get to it. I know we're tight for time, so let's try to do this really quickly. Tips for this round 24, ultimate end of the season. Really quickly, Friday night, MCG. You got Collingwood or Essendon?
Is that a serious question, Donnie?
I gotta ask as the host here.
I wouldn't be betting on Essendon in this one.
I'll tip the Pies.
Training run, glorified training run for the Pies.
I will tip the Pies in this one, but I worry with the injuries on the defensive side. I think Essendon's going to be in this one a little bit more than some people think, because Murphy's out, Moore is out. We'll have to see how it goes. There's 2 big cogs in that back line, and they've been giving up a lot of points. And Essendon, if they can get on a roll, can score. I don't think this is as big a mismatch as some people think. I do think the Pies win this, but I think Essendon's in this a little bit more than some people are giving them credit for. We jump down to Blundstone Arena in Tassie as North Melbourne hosts the Gold Coast Suns. I will have the Suns in this one. I just think they're playing stronger. The Roos are going to lock up the number 1 seed. Harley Reid, here you go, to add to an already talented young midfield. So it's one of those West Coast win actually hands a golden ticket a little bit to the Melbourne Roos.
I'm going to go with North Melbourne on this one. I think that they've got the home advantage at Blundstone. I think they're going to really want to finish on a high note. And, I would definitely go against Gold Coast making that road trip. I'm going to go with North on this one.
Interesting. I like your thoughts on that. MCG, Hawthorn v Fremantle. Your Purple Heart. Can you tip Fremantle going to the G?
I cannot. I don't. I just think that Hawthorn, with their with playing at home and really eager to end the season on the right note, and eager to please Sam Mitchell, I'm going to take Hawthorn in this one. Fremantle have had a long year. It's been a very long, stressful year. The trip to the MCG has not always been kind to the Dockers. Again, there are some banged up players. Jager O'Mara won't be in this one. Couple of the other injuries, Bailey Banfield is going to miss this one. Michael Walters may be a little bit proppy. He's due to come back. But I am going to tip Hawthorn in this one.
I'll tip Hawthorne only because I think if this game was in Optus, I would be much more apt to pick Fremantle, but the travel all the way across, Hawthorne
Hmm.
playing really, really good footy. I think this is just kind of a horrible matchup in timing for the Dockers here. I got the Hawks in this one. We jump up to Brisbane in the Gabba, sees the Brisbane Lions host the St. Kilda Saints. And what I think is a cracking game here. I think this is going to be a little bit closer than some people think. I think Brisbane win it because they play the Gabbas so well at home. St. Kilda, though, I think shows some people they're going to be a little bit of a tough out come finals time.
I'm going to go with Brisbane in this one because of one thing that I witnessed when Ross Lyon was coaching Fremantle is that Ross Lyon has never really had that explosive a kicking side in his recent years of coaching. And if you get into a shooting match with Brisbane, they can put up a lot of points very quickly, and they're at home. And I'm definitely going with
Yep.
Brisbane in this one, I should say.
Yep. All right. GMHBA Stadium as Geelong face the Western Bulldogs. Unfortunately, Geelong has sent a few to the doctor's office to get some off-season surgery. So I will begrudgingly tip the Doggies in this one. I think some of the losses may hurt a little bit. I know the Doggies are coming off a horrible performance against the West Coast Eagles, but I think they've taken a whipping, and I think Geelong may be the recipients of a very angry Dogs team, even down in the Cattery.
I would totally agree with that. I think that anytime you get an animal cornered, well, what do? They bite, scratch, claw, do anything they can to survive. And I think with the embarrassment last week of losing to West Coast, the Doggies are going to be in a position to not only score but score as much as they can to try and build whatever percentage should they need it to get across the line. So I'm going to go with the Bulldogs on this.
All righty. Over to Optus Stadium, West Coast hosting the Adelaide Crows. Who do you like in this one?
Oh boy, I think Adelaide might be a little angry right about now. I think the Crows are going to be really, really seriously um, pissed off to the highest level of festivity, as the old comedian Robin Harris once said. I'm going with Adelaide on this one. I just don't think that the Eagles are going to have it in them to stave off the anger of the Crows and go out on that winning note. And it'll be interesting to see the conversation around Adam Simpson after this. But I
Mhm.
think the Crows are just going to come out snarl. Well, no, it's the Bulldogs who come out snarling, according to the song. So I don't know what do angry crows come out doing?
Cawing, you
Pecking,
would say? I don't know.
cawing.
Pecking, you
Yeah.
could say that.
Well,
No.
or I could say, look, it's going to be a murder. It's going to be a murder.
I love it. I'm going to tip
Murder
the
of
Crows in
crows.
this one, but I'm going to say this. I worry that I don't think you get an angry Crows team. I think you get a Crows team that doesn't care. And that's what I worry.
Could
I
be.
worry about they've spent so much time. And I know Matty Nix gave all the players, I think, what was it, 1 minute to vent all of their frustration. I'm worried they're so focused on being robbed. And again, I do that because I don't think they were robbed. There was still a minute and a half. We don't know. I worry that they're so focused on what happened last week, they take the Eagles for granted. And I think the Eagles are there. I think this is one of those, it's going to scare some Crows fans come fourth quarter. I think this is close.
Hmm.
Crows win it, but I don't think it's the blowout that some people think it is. I hate to say that again. I love my Crows supporters. I have many great Crows fans. I worry you take the Eagles lightly. You're so worried about being angry about what happened this week. I think the Eagles surprise them a little bit. I think this is a closer game some people think. So Adelaide Oval,
Okay.
Port Adelaide v the Richmond Tigers. A couple of their veterans take off. I think Port is starting to kind of find their groove. They're getting a little bit healthy. I have the Power in this one, and I worry this could be Power big.
Yeah, I mean, never tear them apart. You can never tear them apart. And
Mhm.
I think with Port, they're going to be, yeah, I think they're going to be really looking to fine tune, but to also be challenged by Ken Hinkley to keep their intensity.
Mhm.
I think the Tigers, though, it'll be emotional with Dimma, well, actually, Dimma's not there anymore, but wanting to finish the year with some pride. But yeah, Port, I can see a real steamroll happening here. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, jump up. SCG Sydney v Melbourne. I'm going to tip Melbourne in this one, but I think this is a finals like atmosphere. I think this is a tough physical game. I think this is one of those, the intensity of both teams. I think the D's just have a little bit too much, but I think this is a cracker. I think it comes down to it. And I think Sydney shows why. If they get in, they will be dangerous to any of the bottom four teams that drop down if they can get by the elimination final.
Is exactly why I think Sydney are going to win this one. I mean, it's going to be very emotional. They're farewelling Buddy Franklin at the SCG. Sydney are always maybe not this year as much as in recent years, but Sydney are traditionally been tough to beat at the SCG. I think they're going to be really revved up and wanting to give something back to Buddy by winning this one. I think that physical matchup could really hurt for Melbourne. They don't want to get their best players hurt. But I think Sydney's going to pull this one off, and that's going to be a catalyst for them going forward. You just can never count the Swans out of anything. I remember you and I were talking about the year they started 0-7 and they still made the finals. I would never count Sydney out of anything, so I like them here.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see. And then last but not least, Marvel Stadium. And conveniently, this is a fantastic way to end this round. Sees Carlton v. the GWS Giants. And I'm going out on a limb. I think the Giants win this one. I think Carlton escaped Gold Coast last week. I think Harry Mackay's addition actually has decreased Carlton's abilities. I think the Giants, even going down to Marvel Stadium, I think they shock the Blues.
It might happen. I would not be surprised to see it happen. My bigger question is, what is Toby Green going to do that's going to be outrageous this week? Could he do something that could jeopardize his availability in the finals? He has a tendency to get himself in trouble like that. And if you're a Carlton supporter, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for a winning streak to stop before the finals. You don't want the winning streak to stop during the finals, right? But I actually can see your point too, and I think that it would not shock me to see GWS win this one. So I'll go with GW. I'll go with you and go GWS on that one.
Yeah, it'll be fantastic. It's going to be a great last round. Like I said, a little anticlimactic when it comes to the final spot availability, but I still say this is going to be some electric last two games. I may double screen and watch the Swans and keep an eye on that GWS Carlton game because I think it's going to be fantastic. So.
Well, I can guarantee one other thing too. Jesse Hogan ain't kicking 9 goals in that match.
Probably not on Wiedering. I think it's fascinating, but Zerk's Thatcher, I felt so horrible for him because again, he keeps getting these animals and he tries as best he can, but it's just not a close matchup. I think Jacob Wiedering is going to be much a closer matchup when it comes to it. So if Hogan kicks 9, something really went wrong for the Blues there for sure. So ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for our episode. Again, Gil, thank you so much for hopping on. It's always great chatting with you. I know things are going well. Stay safe out in California. Are you in any issue? Because it looks like the weather looks fantastic out there.
Yeah, we were really lucky as far as the rain. We weren't really too concerned. We're in the Ojai Valley. And so rain was never really that big a threat. But the funny thing is right in the middle of the rain we got, suddenly our whole house starts shaking. And it woke my wife up from a nap. And I should have known when I saw my cat jump out of her carrier about 5 minutes early and go scurrying under the bed, because cats and dogs and other small animals are supposedly, or especially cats, have a sixth sense. They know when something is coming and when something just is not right. So when the whole house started to shake, and it's the most intense earthquake I've ever felt living in California, is a 5.1 on the Richter scale. So we had that, and then we had 7 aftershocks. So it definitely it threw a spanner in the works there for a few minutes, and it didn't help that at the moment I was reading a post-apocalyptic novel, and I was just right in the middle of that.
Oh boy, what time? All of life is timing on that one. So I'm glad that you were okay. I'm glad that you were okay.
Did I mention the epicenter was 3 miles from our house?
Oh boy, even better. All right. Unfortunately, but thankfully you are safe. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for our episode. Again, another episode of another episode of AFL Round Review is complete. Thank you for listening. Again, more coverage. Keep an eye out. VFL, Sandful, and Waffle finals are about to start. I will do previews of all of the finals coming up over the next week or so. So keep an eye on that. And again, AFLW starts round 1. I have a couple of great guests to join me to review AFLW round 1 here in a week. Cannot wait for it. You'll have a wonderful evening. And that is going to do it for our episode. Thank you very much.
If I could say one last thing though, Donnie.
Go ahead.
One very last thing, which is this, to anyone and everyone who is watching us in Hawaii, especially if you're from Maui. Malamapono ke akua pu. Stay strong.
Stay strong and stay safe. Take care of yourselves and each other. Fantastic. Our thoughts and prayers out to those on the Hawaiian Islands. So thank you very much. That is going to do it for our episode of Donnie's Discovery.